Hello! So on Twitter there's this clip being shared about of James O'Brien on LBC speaking to a farmer about the inheritance tax rises that are happening for the farmers in the UK right now. And it doesn't really go exactly as James O'Brien would like, because this guy absolutely lays into him. And I, being the office scholar of James O'Brien, some might say that I'm James O'Brien's top guy. I even have one of his books with me right now. This is How to Be Right in a World Gone Wrong by James O'Brien. I even have a page bookmarked appropriately using one of the flyers that had been handed out at the farmers' protest the other day. And as being his top scholar, I thought it'd be good for me to look over this. And I've now read 2 of his books, which probably makes me one of the top 1% of James O'Brien scholars in the entire world, perhaps one of his even top 1% readers. And I find the man quite fascinating because he really is a mouthpiece for the UK government as it exists right now, at least the leftist wing of the UK government. He tries to present himself as a bit of a centrist. If you're not aware of who he is, I mean, I'm very, very jealous of you. But he tries to present himself as a centrist, as somebody who represents the sensible centre of what Britain's politics should be. But really, he just spouts the government talking points, as we can really see in this clip. So before I actually look at this clip, let's take a look at something very quickly, which, if you want to get the measure of a man, get the measure of a man. Let's take a look at this picture that's been released of James O'Brien recently. I think he posted this himself, in fact. Him with Carol Vorderman. Whoa! Quite the jump scare, I know. So I'm not going to be too harsh against the man, but I'm going to point out 2 things. One, which is that there is some Lovecraftian, non-Euclidean geometry going on here. And secondly, look at the way this man smiles. This is not a smile. This is a feral animal baring its teeth. So before I look at the clip first, let's get a little bit of context for this, which is the inheritance tax, which the farmers actually used to be completely exempt from under agricultural property relief, which meant that they didn't have to pay any inheritance tax at all when passing it down from father to son and father to son through the generations, which is a wonderful thing because it is the family farm, it's the family home, it's the family business, it's just what they do. These people are tied to the land and it is what they want to pass on from generation to generation, which I think is a lovely traditional and beautiful thing. The government has decided that no, they don't want that. They see it as kind of a monopoly on farmland that these evil hoarding farmers have, and so they've implemented this policy to make sure that they can break up the monopoly on farms. And what this entails is that the first £1 million of value that the property has is still free of the inheritance tax, and anything above that will be taxed at 20%, which is actually half of the 40% of the normal inheritance tax. So they're trying to sell it as this thing where, well, you're actually getting a discount. You die, the government shows up, values your property and presents your children with a bill that they have to pay, but that's not immoral, it's at a discount that you're getting it. And people have pointed out that this is still going to lead to the destruction of most farms, because what most farms aren't is cash rich. They might have a lot of value in the property itself, in the land, the value of the land, which is constantly inflating due to inflation in general, and then also from electric wind farms, property developers trying to come and bid on it and push the price up. So the land's constantly getting more expensive, but then you've got the cost of the herds that you may keep and all of the equipment that you have as well as the farmhouse that might be on top of it. So it's very, very, very easy for that £1 million threshold to be breached. And there's a bit of a dispute going on between how much of this property, how much of the farms in the UK are going to end up jumped on by this inheritance tax. So first of all, Rachel Reeves' budget, she says that it will only affect the wealthiest 500 estates each year. Now, even this is a bit of a sleight of hand because each year is narrowing the time frame. That doesn't take in the bigger picture, because it could still be affecting all of the farms. It's just that we don't expect everybody to die all at once. So each year might be the annual amount of farmers we expect to die. Either way, experts from the NFU, the National Farmers Union, say it will be up to 70,000 farms. Now, there's been a new government line from this, which is regarding that 500 farms per year. So the way they're trying to pull out this 500 per year figure on the farms is through, again, a sleight of hand, where they're saying that there are these different exemptions that you can take advantage of, which means that for a married couple making use of various nil rate exemptions, an estate of up to £3 million could still be passed on free tax. But again, this is trying to minimise the damage. It's not saying that there isn't a damage, it's trying to minimise the damage and say, well, all of these farmers still won't be affected. And even The Guardian itself, actually, if you scroll down in this article, says, well, actually, will it only affect 500 per year? They say this claim comes from the number of estates that qualified for agricultural property relief last year. Some say this is misleading, however, as the new rules roll together APR and business property relief, which used to give separate allowances for farmers. They could claim APR for their land and BPR for all business assets such as farm machinery. Now when farmers are given a £1 million threshold and a combine harvester alone can cost as much as £500,000, you can see how BPR could eat this up. So it's not going to be just that it's only 500 per year. This is a government produced figure to try and minimise the damage that this is doing in PR terms, because realistically speaking, most of these farms are still going to be affected. Again, the NFU says up to 70,000, which is 1/3. DEFRA itself has actually already said that it might be up to 2/3 of farms affected by this. So it's all ridiculous. The absolute minimum number is a mea culpa thrown by the government, and who is going to defend that line against the farmers themselves who say that they're going to be affected by it? It's our old pal James O'Gammon, and this is where we get to the clip, and we can just take a bit of enjoyment from this, because honestly, James O'Brien, I don't know why LBC still hires him and still employs him, because he is a midwit, he's an idiot. When you read his book, you can see what's inside the content of his mind, outside of the typical LBC format where you expect, well, he's not going to be able to get all of his arguments out because he's sat there in a live environment. With this, you get to see how his mind operates when he's sat down with all of the time in the world to formulate and write out his thoughts. And honestly, it's empty. There is nothing going on in there. All of the arguments of his opponents that he critiques in this are completely dismissed, offhand, without any reasoning or logical argument presented opposing his enemies. It is pure friend-enemy from the beginning. If it's an argument that he's presented that he and his friends in London don't like when he goes to dinner, if all of his friends say, oh, well, that's ridiculous, it's just dismissed as ridiculous offhand. And there's also some surprising admissions in here as well, which will not surprise many people, actually, now that I say it. But anyway, let's take a look at a bit of this clip, and it's lovely to see him getting shouted at.
Stop talking over me and let someone who actually knows speak for once. And I know that's difficult for you, James.
Why are you so rude, Charlie? It's not my fault.
Rude.
It's not my fault. You've just made.
You are the rudest person on the radio because you sit there with your tool in your knob.
I'm the second rudest person on the radio at the moment. At this moment, Charlie.
When a farmer inherits his farm and he can't afford to pay that inheritance tax because it's hundreds of thousands of pounds and he only makes £30,000 a year.
Well, can we crunch the numbers quickly?
That's his home, James.
Can we crunch the numbers quickly?
Yeah, by all means.
So hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of tax, presuming, of course, that it's passed from spouse to spouse and then to heir. So it's in excess of £3 million. So for hundreds of thousands of pounds at a 20% tariff, regardless of what the figure is, the percentage is 20%. You'd have to be living in an estate worth sort of £6, £7, or £8 million.
No, £4.5 million, James.
No.
So you can see just there straight away how he's talking over him, doesn't catch that he says 4.5 million. He's not interested in listening to what this actual farmer says. He's only interested in presenting this construct that he can use to dismiss his concerns. This is what he does with every single call. But even in the examples that he's presenting, if it is the absolute best case scenario that the government has presented, again, all he's doing is presenting the government line on this. If you've got £4.5 million worth of estate and you've got 3 million exempt up to that point, that's £1.5 million. 20% of that will be £300,000, okay? So what you do is you say £300,000 over the course of 10 years, £30,000 per year. Again, farmers aren't cash rich. The average money that a farmer makes per year is about £27,000, £30,000 in this farmer's case. How is he supposed to afford that? How is he supposed to afford that? Every penny that he has made that year has to go towards a bill just because his father's died. How is that fair? But that doesn't matter to James. He doesn't care about that. He doesn't care about logic. He doesn't care about emotions. He doesn't care about morality. He only cares about defending the government line. That's all he's ever cared about. Let's carry on.
Hundreds of thousands of pounds, you said.
4.5. Yeah, exactly.
So that's 1.5 million, 20% of 1.5 million over 10 years.
Yeah, and how are you going to pay that?
40% for everybody else.
How are you going to pay that when you earn 20?
Again, then, 40% for everybody else. Nobody should be paying 40% inheritance tax because nobody should be paying inheritance tax at all. It is a target for government enemies. And James O'Brien, being the voice of the government, what we're watching essentially is the voice of the people, the farmer, having an argument with the voice of the government. But the voice of the government has a recognised class enemy right here. And that's what he's trying to defend. It doesn't matter. All he is friend-enemy distinction.
25 grand a year.
The same. Well, I don't. How can you possibly be argued, Charlie? Mate, Charlie.
My house is protected. When a farmer inherits his farm, his house is at risk.
Why don't you sell some stuff?
Like what, James?
Well, some of you, some of your land.
Who's going to buy it? Who's going to buy it?
I don't know. Lots of people are trying to buy land. We spoke.
There you go, again, defending the government line without realising that that's what he's saying. He's saying, just sell the land. That land that's been in your family for generations that you've tended to, that makes up the British countryside, it doesn't matter, just sell it. Now, James, I'm sure, and I know, because he does in this book a lot, he tries to present himself as like a friend of the working man. But from a bourgeois socialist perspective, and he wouldn't call himself socialist, but he is, they would present themselves as a friend of the working man in terms of the proletariat, the labour worker, and they are townies. He's described as a townie in this video. And the fact of the matter is, the townies have an absolute disgust and hatred for the agricultural workers, the agricultural landowners in this country. They always have the distinction between the metropolitan classes and the agricultural classes. The countryside living has always been very, very distinct in this country. And James O'Brien has nothing but contempt for these people. And I put it down to a few things. Like I said, these people are tied to the land. They're a reminder that there is something that exists outside of the bourgeois metropolitan order. And so they can't have that. These are the anti-globalists, not even through desire to be, just naturally they are anti-globalist because of their function in society and their place within society that they are perfectly happy and content with. And James O'Brien hates that and wants it destroyed. So what's he going to say? Sell up your land. Who's going to buy it? I don't know. And he says in this again, I don't know is one of the proudest things he says, because he says it's good to admit when you don't know. All he's doing is proving his ignorance. James O'Brien gets to go on this radio show where he talks about these things for a living against people like this farmer who are experts in their own field, presumably. But he gets to say what should and shouldn't happen despite the fact he's no idea. But he does actually have an idea. He knows it's going to be wind farms, corporations, property manufacturers, sorry, not property manufacturers. You know what I mean, housing developers. They want to buy up this land, pave over it, put solar farms, put wind farms, anything to destroy the traditional beauty of this country, because he hates that. And he says he doesn't, but he does.
No, that's the funny thing.
What do you want a name?
Another farmer's not going to buy it,
John.
are they?
John's going to buy it. John is going to buy it.
John's going to build solar panels on it.
John, I don't know what he's going to do with it, but he's going to. But you asked me who was going to buy it, which you don't recognise.
We've had the
You're
offers
shouting at me
for solar
again.
panels. We've had the offers for wind farms.
Well, there you go. Then what are you complaining about?
Because we don't want to concrete over the land. I know you're a townie. I know you're happy living in your liberal elite world of London.
Oof. Oof. He constantly likes to quote in this people calling him wokist, liberal elite, and he says it like it's some kind of point of mockery to the people saying it to him when they're describing exactly what he is. But he thinks by just doing this, pulling this, again, monkey, chimpanzee, feral animal baring its teeth. It's not real laughter, it's a contemptful hatred. He thinks if he does this, that it's somehow negated the claim, when it's exactly what he is.
But for us, the countryside is the countryside. It's where our food comes from, James.
So you've been offered.
You seem to have forgotten that.
You
seem to have forgotten that, haven't you, James?
Charlie, you
can't
don't.
accept it.
Okay, mate. I'm going to have a
I'm
little.
not your mate. I hate you. I think you're an idiot.
Okay.
I think you're a lefty, liberal, woke idiot.
Okay, Charlie.
Let's tarmac the AOMB.
Speaking for the people there.
Let's tarmac them. Yeah, get some solar farms on there. Yeah, why not, James?
I think
hey, James, you like immigrants. You probably want to see some homes there as well, don't you?
Well, down with homes.
When was the last time you went to a farm?
I grew up on a working farm. I probably should have mentioned that sooner. I grew up just outside Kidderminster in Worcestershire. The farmers are all around Chaddesley, Corbett and that area.
So what, your dad was a farmer?
No, I've explained several... Do you listen to this programme?
So when you... No, I don't.
Well, how can you have such strong...
I think you're an idiot.
How can you have such strong views about me then?
So that's quite interesting there, which is that he says he grew up on a farm. Was your dad a working farmer? No, he wasn't. So we've got no way of verifying this. As far as I know, I've never heard him mention in this or any other books that he grew up on a farm. I do know one thing that he mentions in this book, though, one thing very important, which I've bookmarked here, which is that he says that he's having this argument with one of the callers. And important thing to note about this book, it's one of the laziest books ever written. Of about 230 pages of it, 70 plus are just written transcripts of calls that he's had. And it's all like this, ones where he's just repeating the question over and over again, being made a fool of, that he thinks makes him look amazing because of his epic dunking debate skills. And he's having an argument with somebody who's saying that I think it's that they have a prayer room for Muslims in their school and they're unhappy about it. And James O'Brien is trying to say, why do you care, bro? Why do you care? And he said, the point is, I'd never heard of it happening before, and truth be told, I didn't believe him, so just immediately assuming that the guy's lying. And I did something I've never done on air before or since. I lied. Andy, says James O'Brien, we've got the headmistress on the other line, and she doesn't know what you're talking about. Outright lie, complete fabrication. Andy then hung up against him. So James O'Brien is kind of proudly admitting that he's a known liar, saying it's the only time he's ever done it on air, but I don't know, you've admitted that you're a liar in one occasion, why should I believe that you're not a liar in other occasions? So out of nowhere, having, as far as I know, never mentioned it before, and I'm one of the top scholars of James O'Brien in the world, he says that he grew up on a farm with a father who wasn't a working farmer. I do know you went to a public school. For American listeners, it's the equivalent of a private school in Britain. So that's very, very interesting that comes out of nowhere conveniently to try and dismiss this guy. And we can watch the rest of it, but really the guy rants on and on. It's very, very satisfying. And James O'Brien just turns the fader down and hangs up the call, which is how you know you've won an argument. And the funny thing is, if he writes another book, which sadly he probably will, James O'Brien's probably going to include this as a triumphant moment of victory for him. He thinks he won this argument, but really we know that he just got owned, because he's no idea what he's talking about. He's a known, admitted liar. He's been absolutely demolished in front of the public eye, and I'm all here for it. And hopefully one day LBC will get rid of James O'Brien, because as far as I'm concerned, this class of journalist is nothing but a drain in this country. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. Tune in next time.